Call this meeting to order. This is the Nottingham Planning Board for September 26, 2018. I just would like to go around the table here and have the members introduce themselves. We'll start with Robert.
Robert Davies, alternate.
Teresa Bascom.
Tony Dumas, Select Board.
Edward Veal.
Dirk Grotenhuis.
Gary Anderson.
Joe Clough.
I'd like to seat Robert Davies for Sue Mooney. Just to let any public know, there is a continuance tonight, so for case 18003 SIT, that case will not be heard this evening and is continued to October 10th. So anybody here for that, we won't be hearing that case this evening.
Mr. Chairman, on that, normally I think we would just usually take a motion to accept or to move the continuation.
Yes, we'll get to that. I'm just indicating to the public.
To do that now, okay.
No, I'll take it in order with that's on the agenda. I just wanted to make sure that if it takes a half an hour to get there, that nobody's here waiting for that half an hour just to hear that we're not going to hear it. So with that, I'll just start in with the first item on the agenda. We have Dale Silva from the Nottingham Building Inspection. I'd like to just have him come forward. Appreciate you showing up, Dale. This is the new building inspector for those that don't know him. He's here primarily just as an introductory, kind of get to know who the planning board is. But we've also asked him to just kind of take a look at some of our regulations. And I mean, he hasn't, well, you've been here maybe a month or two.
A little over, yeah.
So he's not fully immersed into all of the regulations we have, but I think this is a good opportunity for him to at least have that fresh look, and he has provided kind of a bullet list of items that for now might be suggestions in looking at the zoning regulations, but I just wanted to get him in here. We often have either the building inspector and sometimes the zoning board just as kind of an introductory thing. So welcome.
Thank you. It's nice meeting all of you. Thanks for having me here tonight.
Me and you too.
I guess maybe the best thing would probably just, if you have any discussion items ahead of time, that's fine. Or if you want to just follow this, maybe we can just go through your list and give us some of your thoughts. We're a pretty open board. I know a lot of these we've had discussions on already, but it's good to hear some of the reinforcement or experience that you bring in from other areas.
So what I did, as you said, is I've only been here a month or two now, a little less. When I came in, and it's right before the season where you guys need to get this stuff in ready for March, so it's kind of a time crunch. I went through the list, and there was a list from both Russ and some notes from Paul too, going back, and I kind of looked at what they had, and my goal for this particular round was just to prioritize what I kind of felt was the priority ones. Some of them you guys may have already had the luxury of talking about and going over and things like that, so you may have already made decisions on it, and it may be things that I'm bringing up already, but these were the 4 or 5 top ones as far as the zoning ordinance. There were a couple of other things that I think we ought to look at planning wise and town wise as sort of high priorities, but concentrating just on the zoning. These are the few items that I came up with.
Great, thank you. So if you want to just step through them, so we have talked about ADUs, and you're saying we should potentially add, a 2-bedroom maximum to it. And we've had in the past some advice that the building code sort of limits, because we have a square footage maximum, right? That the building code kind of restricts there only to being 1 bedroom. Does that?
I don't believe that to be true.
Okay.
Or restricted to 2-bedroom, but it basically restricted to 2-bedroom and nothing above.
It can be any code out there you can look at. There's nothing that says 750 square feet is 2 bedrooms and you have to have so much per bedroom. What you are saying is correct in the sense that as we look at these, you have to have so much space allotted for everything. There's nothing that actually spells it out, though, that if you wanted to, and I get later into it, we're talking into things like the tiny houses, which is going to be the wave of the future, that kind of parallels to this, but there's nothing that specifically says 750 feet limits you to 2 bedrooms. I haven't seen that in writing. I do understand what you're saying, that it kind of does, but going into the clarity of the whole thing, why not just spell it out for the people? You want to have an ADU, you're getting 2 bedrooms, you're not getting more. Don't even, it spells it out. Yes, it kind of can be 750 feet is going to limit it, but let's make it easy for the people. Let's have it very clear and say, the state law, RSA 674, says you cannot tell them that they can only have 1 bedroom. You can go anything above that. Why not just tell the people right up front and say, we're going to let you do this, but we're limiting it to 2 bedrooms. We don't want this to be a multi-family house. We don't want this getting out of control and saying, okay, I'm going to build a second house where you're not allowed to have 2 primary dwellings, and kind of try to manipulate the system. Let's just be clear about it right up front. That's my thought on that one.
So Dale, I'm curious to see it be increased maximum square footage allowed, and does that tie in with?
It doesn't. The reason why I put that one in there is not for additions or even like garages or things like that, but what we're finding is the intent of the ADU was truly to help elderly, as people are getting older, or young kids starting out. It wasn't intended as a, source of income. It wasn't intended as, it was to truly help people struggling in affordable housing. What I'm finding, and I don't want to, maybe we can limit it this way, not so much on additions, but if somebody has a large house already where the floor is above 750 square feet, and they want to turn their basement into an ADU, or the 3rd floor if it's a finish, and it's already bigger than 750, we're saying, no, you can't do that. And that was my intent with that, was very few people are actually coming in and asking for 750, even if you're putting up a new garage. So it's not really an issue. But by saying 750, if somebody has an existing house already, we're telling you, no, we're not going to let you do that. You can only do half your basement. And that doesn't really make sense. I don't think that was the intent of it. So that's why I thought an increase would be a little bit better. And we could even just word it an increase in existing additions stay at 750. Maybe something like that. But that was my thought process behind that.
Yeah, and so if we have a higher square footage, we're still limiting to
2 bedrooms.
2 bedrooms.
Right.
Yeah, so if somebody really likes to have an open floor plan, kitchen with dining room and living area, maybe they want a bigger one, but it may only be 1 bedroom. And
Yep.
that might exceed the 750.
Exactly. I mean, it's rare. You're seeing a lot of these going over garages. I don't think we would have over 750 feet over a garage, but, so in that case, and I don't think it would be necessary, but for an existing structure already, there is the possibility it's there, and the intent is, nobody's gonna be renting out their basement as, that the intent is truly to help, either their kids or their elderly parents. And I think that's why I'd like to see that increase a little bit.
So going from memory, I think we, so on both of these items, so we, taking a step back, our prior building inspector, code enforcer, Paul Colby, he was pretty heavily involved in our zoning ordinance and our subdivision regs and things like that. He was, at all our meetings and personally kind of rewrote a lot of these for the board. So I'm trying to remember some of the guidance, and it may be outdated, but why we left it the way it was. So obviously with the ADUs, we've changed it a couple times in the last few years, but based on the state RSA changing. And so the 2-bedroom max, I'm trying to remember, I had asked about doing that then, but I think the response was something about that, again, the code would basically restrict it itself of, because you would need a kitchen, there's so many square feet for that, you need a bathroom, there's so many square feet for that, so it was basically self-restricting. And I can't remember if it was also if we put language in there about it, if that would then create a loophole to just go to zoning and ask for, variance on it.
The only thing that, and I printed off the law, I have it here tonight, the House bill. The only thing it says is you cannot tell them that it has to be 1 bedroom.
All right.
That's the only thing the law says, is you cannot say it has to be 1 bedroom.
Yep.
If they want to have 2 bedrooms, they can. Beyond that, you can limit it to 2 bedrooms, you can add more, you can do whatever you want, but you can't tell them that it can only be a 1 bedroom.
And it seems like a lot of communities where there are having a lot of ADUs do have 2 bedrooms. I don't see a lot that have one, but
Right.
And then with the increase in the square footage, going back to memory, I believe we didn't increase it at that point based on the fact that it was almost, would be creating either a loophole for multifamilies and duplexes. So we have, different restrictions for multifamily in the ordinance and multifamily conversions, and then also for duplexes. So in a way, if we start going above that 750, again, the intent was that this is an in-law apartment. It's not.
I agree with what you're saying,
Right.
and when I sent this off, I could only send bullet statements.
Oh, yeah.
I agree with what you're saying as far as any additions, let's not have multifamilies, let's not let them trick us and, start putting, different things in, because then it gets into septic where we can't require it. But I think that we could word it saying, and you could even say, if the existing structure allows for, an increase. I don't know exactly how we're gonna word it, but that was my intent was, and I'm really talking about basements and attics of existing structures, not additions.
yeah.
So I don't know if there could be a compromise there and figure it out. I agree with you that we should not be allowing 750 on new structures. There's no need for it. We keep it right there. But it does create a hardship for somebody that has a house that is 800 square feet, and we're gonna say no, or we're gonna say, okay, you need to block off 50 or 100 feet and not use it. It's not realistic.
Yeah. So right now they would have to go to zoning for a variance on it, because we have it spelled out 750, so they would have to appeal. So right now, that's the method for it, and,
Those weren't really high priorities for me
Yeah.
anyways, but those are things that we're running into as problems already. Even just since I've been here, those have already come up.
Any other members on the board have comments about ADUs at this point? I know this is something we're still kind of looking at, but I think we're going to look at moving towards these two specific ones with this next round.
The ADU above the garage being greater than 750 has just come up before the ZBA. It was on a most recent case. And it was going to force that person to have to build a smaller garage, or build
We,
a smaller.
we have somebody right now that's building a 4-car garage, not for the purpose of the ADU, actually because he has mice in his cars, and he has all these special cars, so he's building a 4-car garage, he wants to put an ADU above it. So what's gonna happen, it's actually gonna be counterproductive, he's going to build kind of an L ADU above the garage and say, I'm not gonna use that space. That's gonna be storage, so what's gonna happen is we're going to look at it as storage, and we're gonna do our building codes based upon that. And you know as well as I do, that as soon as we leave, he's gonna use that whole place, and now he's gonna have a structure that doesn't meet the life safety code, because we did what we were supposed to as two, so that's a perfect example. And even if this person isn't like that, and I shouldn't say that because they may follow the rules, but if he sells the house and the next person that comes in, you know what I mean, down the road, we have a structure that is built that has to have smoke detectors, it has to have 5/8 walls versus, 1/2 inch, things like that for life safety. It would make more sense life safety wise to let him have,
So that
up to
application,
you guys.
that application was for relief from the 750 square feet?
yeah,
Well, it was part of the discussion. It wasn't, the application was for something that, a building other than that.
Okay.
But it came up
So
during
when-
the discussion.
So the garage would be new construction?
Correct.
So that's, given the example of, we may want to consider language around new construction, we still might run into that scenario, correct?
And then that would be specifically for a variance, and that's why we have the ZBA and stuff
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But
And that would be-
what I am saying, but the point that you bring up is, it is happening right now
Oh,
already.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
So right now, in that, we'll say hypothetical situation, there's gonna be multiple variances, because our ADUs are only allowed when they're attached and sharing an internal common door
That still exists.
Of-
It's an attached garage.
of the
yes.
home, okay, but,
It- yeah.
so it's supposed to be a shared.
That's a requirement, and that's
Shared
something
door.
that we don't do detached. They have to have a common space, because then
We
we're
have
getting
talked
into
about
Right.
potentially looking.
Because then
at
you're
detached.
truly getting into multifamily then,
Well,
and that's not the intent of it.
You can get detached though with a variance, because we did have one of those as well.
With a variance, right.
And on that one, actually, there was a hardship with the 750 because they are handicapped. handicapped individuals going into it, and they needed larger space
Additional
to
square
be able to
footage.
move around. So the size, the 750 size is a hardship for a lot of people, and it is something we, I think, need to look at.
Well, and the detached ADU idea, you know, I think comes up too occasionally, where somebody has a detached garage with an area above it.
Right.
And they want to try to use that, and though that's an instance that I
But that would surely be a hardship, because the hardship is it already exists.
Right.
Would we approve it from, oh, I want to build a garage 50 feet away with an ADU, you're kind of getting into multifamily, then personally, I would be against it because it defeats that. But in the case that you just said, yeah, okay, we're trying to help people out in the sense that you already have it, you have the space above it, you know, that would be a hardship, and I would agree with approving that one.
I guess what I see is other instances where there's kind of a quasi-attachment done. and we've seen that, and it's because of a court case that actually went through at one point and
So, yeah,
allowed these I call it quasi-attachments, like a fence.
well, and we were advised previously that, you know, a fence would qualify as connection and
But that's why we
other
changed our
things.
language, though, to specifically state internal.
It does say you have to have an internal door, though.
That was.
Can't tell them it has to be unlocked,
That was to.
but there has to be an
specifically
internal
pass
door
that
between the
loophole
two.
Of saying a connection, because yeah, Paul had mentioned, like, you know, someone have like a 50-foot long trellis, you know, or 70-foot
Right.
long, you know, going between the house and some other structure. But that's why that internal door was put in there, to make sure that loophole was taken out.
So those are my two recommendations on ADUs.
Okay, good. We can go to 2 is the grandfather replaced with non-conforming. I think that's a good idea, but we want to make sure that the state's language is consistent. So if the building permit or the building code or any of those refer to as grandfather, then we should probably stick with that, but if it doesn't, then, you know, specifically the land use piece of it. So we would just need to check it, but I like non-conforming better. Grandfather, it seems like somebody's getting away with it.
Problem with grandfathering is everybody has their own interpretation what that means, and just since I've been here, without exaggerating, I've heard a dozen times
Yeah.
in a month that I have an existing lot, it's grandfathered, I can do what I want. You know, literally, I've heard that a dozen times already. And I'm like, there is no such thing as grandfathering. It's, you know, you can have existing, and there was a case today, which we won't get into, but the law no longer applies. But it applied 8 years ago when it happened, and somebody wanted to change it. After doing some research, we were like, no, you can't change it. This was what you signed up for 8 years ago, and we have to enforce the law of 8 years ago.
Yeah.
So the term grandfathering, there was a special term for it. It wasn't grandfathering, and it slips my mind right now. But grandfathering just gets us into trouble. People think that they can do whatever they want with that.
And-
I understand what you're saying, but
I like, you know, it's either conforming or it's not conforming. I like the black and white of that.
And we don't define it either of the terms, so it's probably, whereas non-conforming specifically has, you know, zoning definitions in the RSA's.
Yep.
And grandfather does not,
No, grandfathered's not in there.
so we should.
it just makes it a little clearer.
Talk a little bit about the side setbacks and concerns with that. I know we've got 20 feet if non-conforming and 50 if it is conforming.
Well, there's two. First,
Some,
I have to say, and I get, my job is not to make policy, that's your job. My job is to enforce it. I have to admit that I was a little surprised to see 50 feet setbacks to begin with. That's on the very high side. Very few towns do that. That's very constricting to begin with. That's up to you guys, and you may have already had discussions about this, and that's the way it's gonna be, but I think 50 feet is very restrictive to people, especially when we're dealing with a lot of small towns, because what you have is a lot of non-conforming lots, undersized and things like that. So in general, just my philosophy, big pictures, I think 50 is way too restrictive. Having said that, specifically what is here, the way our ordinance reads is you have to meet 50 feet if you have 2 acres. If you have less than 2 acres, it drops down to 20 feet. And I used a term which I probably shouldn't have, you're almost being punished. But the sense was, just this week, a case came to me and the person asked me, he has exactly 2 acres. What he wants to do is 30 feet away from the property line. And he's looking at me and he says, so if I had less acreage, 1.1 less acre, you would let me do this. But because I'm meeting it and I'm a conforming lot, in theory, I'm kind of being punished. What my solution is there's 2 different options. We could actually compromise on the 2 and bring the numbers more realistic for either one, or where I came from next door, you guys all know I came from Northwood, they had a formula. So it wasn't 20 feet, 50 feet, 40 feet, it was how much land do you have, how wide is it, and then it floated either way. So it wasn't a giant jump from 50 feet to 20. If you missed it by a little bit, okay, you might have to be 45 feet. It wasn't in writing, it was a formula, what you did. And that is a way of treating everybody fairly. Based upon the land that you have, is what your setback is gonna be for that. It's a floating thing, but everybody is treated equally. It's not, jumping from one extreme to the other. It's not a fun formula, it's complicated, but
And now
Is there a
you've,
bottom bound minimum?
yes, you still have the minimum and stuff. Yeah, exactly. It's not like you can say, okay, I have a 10-foot wide property, my setback is, 6 inches,
Yeah,
you
okay.
still have your bottom line, exactly. But everything in between, instead of going from one extreme to the other, is adjusted by what you have. We can look into that before I got you the formula and showed you what it was. I didn't know if you'd be receptive to even looking at something like that. We can get you that and see, because it is kind of, I don't want to say punitive, that's not the right word, but look at it from this guy's point of view. I have what I supposed to. I have 2 acres, so I can't build it. If I had 1.9 acres, I could build it.
But there is still a third option. He can still go before the ZBA.
Right.
But that's expensive for landowners. And in my opinion, if a person has a 2-acre lot and wants to build something that really would be allowed if it was just a smaller lot, why should they have to go through the expense of going before the ZBA?
I'm not necessarily saying that.
No.
Because if you don't meet the setbacks, you don't meet the setbacks. It's
Correct.
not, but there's a compromise in between the two.
so you're talking about lots that are already in existence.
Of course, a new lot, we're not gonna give it to you unless, we're not gonna make a subdivision because these are our standards today.
Right, I think, yeah, so I think that when this was written the way it was trying to find that compromise since we do have a lot of lots that are less than 2 acres, mostly around the lake, that were prior camp lots and things like that, and trying to find a compromise where we're not sending everything from there over to
Right.
the ZBA
I appreciate that.
be that, because they're just tighter lots, so it's trying to allow those individuals that have those lots, you can't just take away their right to.
And that's a
build on.
good thing. That really is a good thing. I pride myself on treating, whatever the rules are, I don't care if they're really weak or really excessive.
Yeah.
But I pride myself on treating everybody equally and fairly. This really isn't in that sense. And there is a way that we could treat everybody fairly, because if it was prorated to what you have, that allows you to compromise for these tiny lots and still have somebody that can build, but it doesn't, and going back to what you said, doesn't mean you're gonna get the world. This is the bottom line. But you're gonna get, and whatever it is, and for the sake of it, let's say it works out to like 50 or 60% or whatever the numbers are, however it works out, we're still treating everybody the same. If you have a lot that is, 200 feet wide, well, that's a bad example. If you had a lot that was 49 feet wide, and then somebody that has a lot that's 20 feet wide, we're just gonna use this formula, and based upon what it is what your setback is, and that compromises it and allows the tiny lots to still have on the waterfront an opportunity.
It seems to also work in this way, somebody that has, let's say, 1 3/4 acres, they're gonna get, you know, what's due them in the, to say it that way, versus all going right down to 20 feet. So they might not get the 20 foot setback. They might get 30 feet. It sounds like by your formula.
Right.
So it
And
does
let's,
sound-
let's look at it this way, the hardship. Let's say two people own 2 acres of land. You know, I own a square block of land, I put my house right in the middle, there's no problem. Or even, you know, if it doesn't meet the setback, I'm still gonna meet the 50 feet. What if somebody else owns 2 acres of land and it's a 100-foot strip a mile long? Okay, so they have 2 acres of land, they're never gonna be able to meet the 50 feet. You know, so what do we do in that case? And that doesn't mean they're gonna get it, because going back to what you said, there has to be a minimum, but you have to look at the lot size itself. So 2 acres isn't necessarily 2 acres in the sense of how we're looking at it. What this would do is the formula, where you would look at the width of the lot, and that's what the formula is based upon, is lot width, and then you figure out what the setbacks would be. I can get that formula for you, but like I said, I wasn't gonna waste time until I found out it was something you were receptive to or not.
Yeah, I think if you can provide us that, I think we'll have it for some future discussions and, you know, whether we revise it or whether we don't. At least we'll have something that kind of will click into our heads of what it means. And then is this similar to the septic here? We've got, oh, you're just feeling that 50 is too far, and 10 is the state, we should have the state.
This is kind of my own personal pet peeve, having to say no to people all the time. We're talking about a septic. Now, I believe it was you, Ed, that you know, gave some responses back. So, we're talking about, the way the regulations read, it says anything man-made. We are talking about something underground that's not really having an impact. Yes, wells and radiuses like that, all of that still applies. We don't control that anyways, or regulate that, the state does. They're not gonna, no matter what we do, they're not gonna approve it unless you have your 75-foot well radius, although there are exceptions that they have to approve it if it's like a replacement one, but they're gonna find the best location on the lot for it. So once they find the best location and what they approve, then it's up to us whether we approve our ordinances or not. So if we treat a leach field as 50-foot setback, that's what we're already talking about for the house. So the house might just squeeze through, that's 50 feet, and now we're saying the leach field has to be there. So now you're talking about possibly moving the house over another 20, 30 feet. This is really, if anything is in here, this is the most excessive one that we have. Again, where I came from, I hate to bring that up, it was 20 feet. That was what there was, and I thought that was excessive. You have septic designers coming in all the time saying, this is what the state approves, they're doing it based upon what they believe is, not so much from a zoning, but from a health and safety standpoint, that's what they approve, and then we go above it. We're not talking about a structure above ground that's gonna affect anything. I don't really see why we're telling them they have to have 50 feet away from the property line. I just can't think of a single reason why there would be a benefit. This is the most excessive one out of everything that we have here. And even if we don't drop it down to 10, I would recommend 20.
Yeah, I think the concerns have been primarily with migration, you know, onto the next person's property, and that's probably the main reason.
But that's
That's
not,
it.
the state's not gonna approve it anyways. I mean, we're not, this isn't like somebody's building their shed and like, you know, moving stuff over property lines. This is something that's gonna be designed by somebody with a license. It's, the state's gotta be approved. I guess I don't really see it that it's
I
going
think the
to.
only thing is that, so the state kind of gets it down to the minimum, right? I mean, it's the
10 feet.
safest minimum,
Right.
and then the community is saying, well, we want to be a little bit more conservative than the state's minimum
Yep.
to protect
Fair enough.
the abutter. I think that that's the reason for it, whether, I mean, I wasn't here when it was written, but, you know, I think the 10 to 50 is a pretty big range, and I think the board may consider something in the middle. I think it's up to the board, and we'll, if we want to go in there.
If you do look at it, I would ask you to consider that based upon some of our other ordinances, that a house is gonna be 50 feet away anyways on one of these small lots. So we've got to give them room, depending on where it is.
Yeah, you have competing interests for that 50 feet, or
Right.
beyond that 50 feet.
So, I mean, I wouldn't even want to split it. If we were going to do this, I would respectfully ask 20 feet, bring it down to 20 if you want to have that extra buffer.
Again,
And that's giving you 30 feet to put it in, if that is the only truly place to put it in front of the house or the side of the house or wherever it works, however it is.
Does anybody know where in our zoning it says that sewage has to be
50 feet?
50 feet?
I can't find it. I'm looking for
I
it.
can't find it either.
it's in our building envelope or lot envelope, the definition. It's in there. This was something, one of those touch points when we had the joint ZBA meeting last year or the year before, because we had this go into onto the ballot. So yeah, it's page 2 of the zoning ordinance,
Yep.
number 2.
Yep,
And
right there.
so when you mention these,
Here.
again, so would that be for, would you suggest that be changed for just existing lots or also for new lots? Because ideally, I think some of the argument goes, again, yeah, that the state does the minimum kind of for health and safety. You know, we could be more restrictive on anything than the state. In that, you know, these are generally, for new subdivisions, for example, if they're regular subdivision, they're anywhere usually between 2, 3, 4, 5 acre lots that we're seeing. So if a septic fails, you know,
If the septic fails, it doesn't matter anyways, because.
it's pretty far out and people may not.
We can't,
Say anything
if you
about
have a house and your septic fails.
Yeah.
And the only place is to put that right on the property line, neither us nor the state of New Hampshire can say no. You can't tell somebody they can't have a septic system after they've already lived there. So a failed septic doesn't really apply because they're gonna get one. The state can pick the best situation for it. Going back to what you said,
But-
I think this is the only time that I would suggest it even applies to new ones too, because we are looking at lots, if they do have the 2 acres, we still have the 50-foot setbacks, which is high, and if that's what the town wants, is to, you know, protect the quality of everything. So we still have 50 feet already. And now if we were to be at, you know, another 20, even if you compromise to 25, we're looking at least 80 feet from the property line now. So I think even a new lot, this would be applied and we would bring it down to 20 would be.
So we already have a discrepancy in our zoning, because on page 18, the sanitary protection,
Page what?
HL, I think it is, says that the sewage has to comply to the state standards.
I'm sorry, Buzz, what page?
Page 18,
Oh, 18, okay. 18. That's an 8.
It sounds like we're more restrictive than the state standard.
We are.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, but we've got it both ways in our zoning. That's what I'm
Well,
saying.
we're saying that there's a minimum that it has to apply to the state, and we've put further restrictions within our current.
You're allowed to go above it, not below it,
Correct, I
Right.
was just gonna say that.
with certain things.
In
There are other things you can't.
Well,
for
you could,
sprinklers.
I think for Buzz's term here, Buzz's thinking here is that it's saying it shall be consistent.
It shall be.
Yeah.
So if I'm consistent with those RSAs,
Then we can't restrict it to 50.
then, and if the RSA says 10 feet, I can't be consistent with that, and then Town of Nottingham says 50 feet. Right.
Then it begs the question, why do we even call this out? Because they have to apply it to the state standard anyway.
I would suggest that before we even dive into that we read RSA 45 and also the rules of.
Sure.
Yeah.
The Subsurface Acts or whatever it is
Didn't,
now.
I didn't think, we didn't need to get too deep a dive into these, but
Yeah.
these are,
Because some of those could just describe the standards for the actual, you know, the tanks and.
Yeah.
and leach
well, these are
field.
good things we can do some homework on.
Yep.
Just one last question as it pertains to this. So the setback is because of the building envelope. And we're stating right now that the building and the septic have to be within that envelope. And earlier, we were talking about potentially changing some of the setbacks to, if we were to entertain the idea of the formula, then essentially you're gonna have to review 2 separate lines theoretically. If we have a discrete value for the septic and then we have a formula for the other one, so I would just suggest to consider a minimum in both cases, and then could the formula apply for the building envelope?
So with the building envelope, or, well, the calculation would be for the building setback, right?
Yes.
And would that be a similar calculation for the septic setback, or are we just looking at?
Unfortunately, I don't agree with it, but unfortunately, yes, because what the ordinance says is anything man-made. Man-made structures.
Okay,
Because if it didn't apply to that, then we wouldn't have to do this at all, and we could just go to, you know, the 10 feet the state says, but you specifically identify it. So yes, it would have to apply to both. Good point.
But I think that simplifies things if people are looking at the lot consistently in terms of the building envelope and everything.
But again, we're gonna have to make sure we have two separate sections for the
Yeah.
setbacks because of the existing versus,
Yes.
you know, new subdivision.
Yep.
And I think part of the setback thing too now with the septic also helps to, the bigger setbacks, we're also there to potentially help avoid your large rectangular
Yep.
parcels by having, you know, making sure, you know, they're not just 20 feet, and then have 30,000 contiguous square feet of, you know, land that's, you know, very narrow.
All of these rules are here because something happened in the past and we need to protect the future. And I'm not trying to get away from that at all.
so, some lot coverage, most towns are around 30.
And with that, we have I think we go up to 50 on industrial commercial. So would you suggest that we look at that as well? Or do you see that?
I think it applies,
often-
to be honest, I think it applies more to commercial than residential, because we're talking about more permeable surfaces and how we're gonna, you know, drain these things and stuff like that, you know, parking lots and things. And you caught me off guard. I don't know what it is. Is it 50%
I
for
think it
commercial?
might not even
I didn't
be-
see
yeah,
that.
it is. Maximum lot coverage is 50% in the commercial industrial zone. Which I saw that before and thought that was high, and I don't think we've discussed that, and I know a lot of communities are looking at this kind of thing because of stormwater and storm frequency and storm.
I didn't catch
density.
that, but you bring up a good point. In fact, I think it would apply more to even commercial than residential.
Yeah, because obviously with commercial, you tend to get more of, I know you tend to get more of the actual water retention facilities, and they're probably monitored and more often
Yep.
than if it was in a residential neighborhood.
Yeah, it's 50 in the commercial, industrial.
Do you know if that seems, you know, overly high compared to like surrounding communities?
I've never researched that. I can research
Yeah.
it if you want me to.
Well, we just don't, we obviously don't see a lot of commercial development here, and,
Right.
you know, so we don't want to be overly unfriendly to, you know, the appropriate commercial risk or commercial adventure. But we also don't.
I don't even see, just looking at the commercial that you have, I don't really see, I can think of maybe one where that might even be applied. Usually, you know, unless we're talking big industry, which is not what we are,
Yep.
that's really not an issue, but it's more the smaller stuff. If you have restaurants, gas stations, that kind of thing on a small lot where they don't need a lot of space, that's where it would come in and apply.
Yep.
So I think that's a good point.
And even now, I mean, there are a lot of newer technologies that are used in dealing with stormwater, that it doesn't matter whether it's pervious coverage or not.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of infiltration practices now, a lot of things that can be done in condensed areas, stormwater treatments, that the lot coverage, it might even be okay if it goes up. I mean, it could increase, you know,
If we can demonstrate.
if you can demonstrate that it's being treated. Okay.
And it is lot coverage, it's not a buildable area, for example.
No, it is lot coverage because all of that applies, and that's why usually it doesn't affect, you may even have wetlands that isn't buildable, but you still get credit for all of that.
Right.
So, it's not really an issue.
Yep.
It's worth looking at, though.
Why don't we go to the next one here, change temporary living quarters to temporary living quarters?
This one's kind of an important one.
Must be
I
listed
very
on-
specifically don't want to talk details.
That's fine. We
I
don't-
have two active cases right now.
Then we can
No,
just
it's
take
important that we
for
talk
the
about it,
face-
though.
Yeah.
I have no means to enforce these cases right now because what your ordinance says, it says you can live in a camper temporarily, period. What is that? If I'm building a house, it's temporarily 2 years. There's nothing in here. What I would like to do is I'd like to create a seasonal camping permit, and I don't want to have it on specific times, because you can't tell somebody when somebody might be involved in a winter sport or a summer sport on the water, something like that. What I'd like to do is tell you, we're going to give you 180 days to figure out what it is that you want to do. If you want to go camping for 180 days, great. You want to go snowmobiling, great. You want to build a house, you're trying to do something, you're struggling, you get 180 days. It's not temporary. It's still temporary, but we're going to tell you what it is. The other important thing that this does is by having a seasonal camping permit, the selectmen would be the ones that sign off on it, not me. It would have to go to them. And what that does is it gives us the ability to say, where are you going to put your waste? You're not just going to get a camping permit, it's temporary, we're not going to worry about it, and you're literally pumping, product onto the ground. We can make them come to us first, get a seasonal camping permit, and say, prove to me, do you have a septic system? Or are you going to have somebody come and pump this out every month and show us, the receipts if we need to, or whatever, in case there's complaints from the neighbors, or, if there's a smell or something. It allows us to regulate it. Right now, I have zero enforcement, because what the rule says is I can stay here temporary. So I go to the person, I say, you can't stay here any longer. I'm just here temporary, this isn't my life plan. And they stay there for years.
How do we enforce occupancy dates?
So a camper, and it even does say it in here, is not intended for permanent residence. How we enforce that is by we putting a time frame on it. We're going to allow you to stay in your camper, your house burnt down, you got foreclosed on. We're going to let you stay here for a few months and figure out what you're doing. But you're going to prove to us that you're going to not be pumping, feces on the ground. You're going to show us where your gray water is going. You're going to show us that you're not on top of your neighbors. And those are all questions that the selectmen will have to answer, or you'll not answer. They would have to be answered to the selectmen, and they would justify whether they're going to get a seasonal camping permit or not.
Let me take that one step further, Dale. What happens if somebody puts a temporary camper on a lot, uses it for a specified amount of time, and then abandons it there? There's nothing in our regulations that can force them to take the abandoned trailer off the lot.
It wouldn't be abandoned. As long as you don't have 4 unregistered vehicles, you're not a junkyard. If I own a piece of land and I want to put you can't just go put a camper anywhere. You still have to own the land or have permission from the landowner.
Well, I've got one behind my house that's been there for 20 years and been abandoned for 15.
Somebody owns that land though.
Oh, yeah.
So who owns the land? They're the ones that are, but in theory, actually the way the law reads, if they own that camper now, even because it's been there forever and it's abandoned, you're allowed to have 4 unregistered vehicles, or 3. When you have a 4th one, it becomes a junkyard.
So what you're talking about doing would not force them to remove the camper when they're done using it?
No. You could have the camper you could leave the camper there for 20 years. You're only gonna be allowed to live in it for 180 days though.
Gotcha.
We're controlling housing, we're controlling safety and health by where, gray water and, product is going. We're controlling those things. We're controlling the schools in the sense that we're not going to have somebody not paying taxes and you have 500 campers in town, with 3 kids each, so you have 150 kids going to the school without any tax money coming in. That's not fair to everybody else. That's all part of it. So we're controlling what temporary is. It's not changing anything other than defining what temporary is. I
So,
think that's a very important
in a
one.
scenario of, I know a lot of people have campers, and I see them popped up, in the summertime, maybe they're just having a little vacation from their house next door. Is that part of that scenario? Is that a hard thing to?
If you really want it to be 100% technical, yes, only because of the kids. Let's say the kids are staying out there for the summer.
Yeah.
Okay, so where's the gray water going? Are they using the bathroom? That kind of stuff. We don't have the time or the resources to be going and doing that. We're talking really, one, if a complaint comes in, because that's how we find out most of this stuff.
Yeah.
We don't go out in the woods looking. Usually it's a neighbor that's complaining, or there was some incident or something along the line, or it's along the waterfront. we're not looking to become so strict that we're going into people's houses and saying, you have a camper, you know, you can't let your kids sleep in it overnight for a week, or, you know, your cousin, or, that's not what this is about. You know, you're on your house, let people live. It's truly the people that are out in the woods that are causing an environmental concern.
So do we have any, did you read anything in here that's, has a seasonal camping, or is anything that could be
What we have is
adjusted?
understood, well, there is something in here on the travel campers, and it just says you're allowed to live in it temporary.
Okay, so it would be
That
kind of
does,
amending
so all I'm trying
that.
to do is change temporary
To
to temporary,
temporary.
comma, maximum 180 days. That's all I'm looking to do, is add maximum 180 days, and that gives me the right to go in and it's something to enforce.
Dale, do you have any idea what page this is on? Because I've been looking all the way through Article 4 and can't find
Wanna
it.
help me on that one?
Page 20?
Page 20.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's under motorhome, number, letter P,
Yep, right there.
motorhome and travel trailers.
Okay.
Travel trailer motorhomes are neither intended nor allowed as permanent full-time residents, but as temporary living quarters.
Okay, thank you.
And it already talks, it goes on to talk about the sanitary protection. This is just gonna give me the ability to enforce that rule.
Okay.
And so the 180 days, that's obviously, you know, that's half a year. Do you find that that's, I don't know if, what other towns do, you know, if it's usually like 3 months, you know, which is a season versus,
Well, you do have people that may want to, let's say somebody has a piece of land on the water. They don't have a house, they can't afford it. They may want to go there from April to August. I mean, you know, something like that. So 90 days may not be in much. Somebody else may be into hunting, you know, and they want that extra time frame. You know, it could be
Or
winter
if
sports.
they're
you
building a house, like you mentioned.
know, if they're building a house.
Sometimes
or
it
if they're on
doesn't
tough
happen.
times. I don't think that we want to be so strict that somebody's struggling, but at the same time, and that's the case that I don't want to get into, but somebody was struggling. You know, a friend let them stay there. That's great. We're going to help people out, help them get back on their feet. But there is going to be an end date on it. So I think, I thought about this one a lot. I don't think 90 days is really, I mean, even if somebody goes, puts a camper on a lot in April, you're talking April, May, June. You know, so let's give them the summer or the winter or something.
I have seen in other towns where 180 sounds right, but they also have specific zoning districts where camping activities and other things like that are called out specifically, where we only have residential and commercial zoning. But that's where they apply some of those. They prevent occupancy in their residential area, and then in the camping district, they have time constraints around occupancy and timelines.
as I say, that'd be a second thing, if we'd have to add language, or if that'd be in the permit about, you know, that
Now-
it's limited to one camper versus, you know, so you don't get
Well-
a campground set up. You know.
That's the next thing that I want to be very careful here, and I have to give the other side of it. I think this is important, but Nottingham has a very unique situation where, how does this affect campgrounds? That's something that we need to look at too, and are we prepared to deal with that? Are people living in campers forever? Before we put this in there, that's something that you need to tackle and have a serious conversation about. What's going to come from that?
Just grandfather it in, I'm kidding.
Form it in.
It's reality. I mean, if we do this, which I really think that we need to for other reasons, there are consequences that we need to consider.
Well, you could also make it renewable at least one time.
That would be up to the selectmen, because they could keep coming back. You get a camping permit for 180 days, and then they come back and the selectmen want to give them another camping permit.
That would solve the campground problem. If the campground is taking care of the sanitary problem,
Yep.
sanitation problem, then they have to renew their permit with the selectmen.
So every 180 days, they go to the selectmen and do it. That would be an option.
Could we request feedback from Board of Selectmen on this topic? I'd just be curious if we'd be able to have a process stood up to support.
And we could work it into effect if it's a commercial campground. You know, that could be a different scenario than a camper
could be-
on a lot.
It could be something as simple as saying you make campgrounds exempt, if that's the route you want to go.
Yeah. Right.
However you guys want to do that. But on the other side, not looking at the campground, and that's not what this is about. It's not about the campground. It's truly about the people out in the woods that are causing a health situation.
Yeah.
That's the reason we need to do this, in my opinion.
Okay, let's keep moving. Fencing? No, what?
Sorry, I was looking for a pen.
Oh, so fencing 1 foot back from the property line,
Fencing,
6
the height
feet.
wasn't an issue. We just don't have it's just an oversight in here. You don't have to have a fence permit. Everything else is a structure. Do you want to, if you want to put up a fence, do you want to treat that and regulate it? It's not a, we're not even required to give a permit for a fence right now. Is that something that you want? Most towns have that. You know, and what that does is, if no other reason, it stops people from putting up fences over their neighbor's property, and then you get into a, you know, contest where we're fighting each other. You have to come in and we have to give me a permit, we look at it, we make sure everything's fine. You know, you get your $50 or whatever it's gonna be for the fence.
You have to, but is that part of, do you have to have that surveyed and property lines surveyed?
No, because it still falls back on the applicant. It's still their responsibility, you know, but, the reason why I thought of this one is a fence went up down the street recently, and it's kind of on the corner, and I think it's fine. If you guys you'll drive by it tonight on your way home, depending where you live. It's not a big deal, but looking at it made me think, what happens if somebody puts a fence and it's kind of obstructing the view of the road and things like that? We have no way of actually, nothing in our ordinance says you need to have a fence permit. So there's nothing stopping people from doing it right now, and it could be a safety thing. It's not that big of a deal, but right now I can't tell anybody, no, you can't have a fence, do what you want.
Where was that reference to man-made structures again? I'm just curious if that's,
Huh?
2C2.
Is it 2C2 that says anything man-made?
Yeah. Yep.
2C2 says everything, which is kind of, it's very, 2C2 kind of rambles, to be perfectly honest.
Yes, we do, it has been identified that there is some organizational things that need to happen to this zoning ordinance.
Overall, it's very good. Just, I noticed that one section, and that's a very important section, kind of goes in, it's got a lot happening in it.
Yep.
I'm not seeing it, I don't know why.
And stepping back for a second while we're looking at that, to the temporary living quarters thing, we'd also just have to make sure the language was specific.
sorry, what?
Stepping back for a second to the temporary living quarters, while we're looking up that piece, we'd also have to make sure the language was that it would be per lot, that the permit would be per lot per year. Because otherwise you get in a situation where someone, you know, when someone's renting out their lot every year for a full year, you rent out one person for 6 months, another group for the next 6 months. So that means every year you have, you know, a lot that's just rented out with people living in temporary trailers.
Well, that would kind of
So you could tie in the
conflict
permit.
with what he had said earlier, though, that you could renew the permit. So I don't know how you would want to do that, because his suggestion was, you know, you go for 6 months and then you go, so that's something you would have to figure out.
Yeah,
Would you want to
hardship
limit it to
situation.
6 months per lot a year? That would be in,
But they're going before the select board, so it would, I mean, they'd be obviously, I'm sure, asking,
Yeah, if there's a different person
What's
every
going
6
on?
months that's going in for
right,
this camping permit.
Yeah.
Or maybe it would just be.
well, seasonal camping permits would still come to me first as every other permit. And I could keep track of that and pass it on to them and say, you know, let's say if there are 2 per lot, or not, you know, consecutive, it could be my responsibility to, and that'd be very easy to do with Avatar. Just say, okay, one was just there, they're coming back again, so at least they have all the information. And then they can make the decision.
So, Dale,
Yeah.
I don't think the word is man-made that we're looking for.
Is it the
It's
non-habitable?
definition of structure.
Non-habitable.
Non-habitable structures.
Habitable.
So I'm just curious if
So I
fences
guess
technically.
that could solve a few things right there, if it's not the interpretation of you, but what is non-habitable structure? Is that a septic field? Is that a tree house? Is that a fence? What is that?
I assume we define that, but. So maybe we just note to clarify that, because
I've got a question for you on fencing. If someone has farm animals and they want to put up a fence to keep them in, would they then have, is your understanding that they would have to go to you to get a permit to put up a fence for their animals, regardless of where it is on their property?
Yeah, I was gonna say this, ask the same question, because, you know,
Because I own a farm just down the road from here, and we put up
we put up,
fencing.
and it
for
gets
our-
changed all the time.
Yeah, and we put up fencing for our pigs.
Yeah.
Nobody wants them all over the place, I guarantee you that. But to go before you and pay $50 every season because I'm moving the pigs around is not going to
That's
sit well
not the-
for me.
I don't know how to get around that, but that's not the intent of it, no. It's more of a permanent,
So you're talking more boundary, and if we specify it as boundary or dividing a property from your neighbors for the purpose of either privacy or boundary, but I mean, if you're
you know,
gonna,
that,
I mean, we have to be careful if we're expecting something along those lines.
Well,
It's,
I was wondering if there's a carve out, because agriculture tends to have its own, like, kind of like sub-codes and things, so I'm wondering if there might be a
Well,
code.
not only
carve
that,
out
but I was also
farming thing.
thinking, if it's a business, as you say, like in your case, you have farm animals,
we have pigs,
Okay.
but we raise them for ourselves. It's not to sell out to other people.
but if it was, it would have to have a site plan, if it was like a true farm or whatever, so that would all be covered under that, it would be allowed. But I see your point. I've never had that be as an issue. I mean, if somebody's putting up a dog pen, you know, a fence pen, I don't think, I'm not gonna be going in and looking at
Okay.
that. That's,
Just
I'm
wanted
not
to-
looking to be that strict, in fact.
No,
Just
no,
the
no.
opposite.
It's just if we go into fencing, fencing encompasses a lot, especially when you're looking at
Yeah, I have to change
farms.
I had to change my fencing all the time, because my cows would get through one side, and then I'd be like, oh, it wasn't good enough, I gotta build up another fence, so. Always building fences, when you have animals,
Yes, yes.
yes.
Again, it could be very simple as what we were talking about before, is saying fencing for animals are exempt. You know, instead of saying that it has to be a boundary marker, because now you're getting into, well, what's the boundary, is it 5, 10 feet, whatever? But it could be something, and that would be up for you guys to determine, and just say, you know, animals are exempt, fencing for animals. Now, what is that? Now it's gonna get cloudy again.
Yeah, it's gonna get cleaned up.
Exactly,
That's-
especially if
that's for
somebody.
you guys to decide.
Somebody says, well, everyone wanted to keep the deer out of their animals, so I'm putting up this
Right.
fence.
That people will always find a loophole.
Uh-huh.
But again, it comes down to what the intent of this is one, a safety issue if it's by the road, and two, a boundary issue. That's what this is about. And you brought up spike fences and stuff like that. That's a cloudy area. So there's nothing that says you can build a fence whatever you want. But New Hampshire defines a spike fence as anything over 6 feet. So we don't have anything that says you can only have a fence that says 8 feet. You want to do it, do it. But as soon as somebody complains, now it's a spike fence, and now we're getting into a problem. So that's and every town faces that.
Okay.
New Hampshire just defines what a spike fence is.
But if it's a noise barrier, sound barrier, like on the highways, so it's what, 12 feet?
We don't have any highways. All right, let's listen to your take on tiny homes, the new wave.
I have none. Not touching it. But you guys need to.
Yeah.
It is coming. I dealt with 2 next door. They don't count as trailers. Our own ordinance specifically says you can't put it in that category because our own ordinance specifically says not intended for permanent use. These homes are intended for permanent use.
Are you talking ones on wheels or ones that
On
are
wheels, yep.
tiny but built on property?
I personally know somebody that built one of these, and it's on wheels, but their justification is it is a home, and there is actual, on a federal level, national level, there is backing that these count. My recommendation, if we were gonna do it, is we treat these as home and we give everybody the same respect and rights as everybody else. Yes, this is a home, you're allowed to live in it. You have to have 2 acres, you have to be 50 feet away, you have to have septic, and we're gonna treat it as a home. We're gonna acknowledge that it is a home. but you have to meet the same ordinance as everybody else. That would be my take on it.
So with that, so they would have to be connected to utility. Would that be part of the requirement? Because usually a home is obviously connected to permanent utilities, permanent, leach field and everything.
You're required to have, the only reason you would have to have utilities is because you're required to have a leach field, so you'd have to have a pump. There is nothing that says you have to have heat, even with kids in the house. You do not have to have heat. You do not have to have running water. There's no rules for that. Actually, that's not true. You do have to have heat. It doesn't have to be a furnace. A wood stove can apply,
Right,
or
not
something
under
like that.
health,
Yeah.
health area.
Or for
You-
the certificate of occupancy, what criteria does that usually require for like when someone's putting a new home up and?
I've never had somebody come up to me and not want electricity in their home, so it's never come up.
Yeah.
What about
I have had people
off-grid
that say no
scenarios?
heat though, because of what they do. What's that?
Sorry, I'll ask.
Okay,
after. Off-grid scenarios, people that want to do
Right, that's what I was
solar.
gonna say, and composting and all that.
Well, actually, the thing with solar, you're not allowed to be off the grid anyways. You have to have electricity. I have solar at my house. I have to have a meter, which I pay $13 a month for. And actually, you need, the way it is, and it's done because of national lobby and stuff like that, you have to be on the grid. So you're contributing to, so they're still having money to run the telephone poles and all that stuff for everybody else. So solar's not really an issue. You can't be off the grid anyways, that way.
But you can for composting,
Right.
toilets and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
So there's no requirement to have electricity, there's no requirement, but there is a requirement to have septic. Now you need water, so that's where your electricity is coming from. That's how they get around it.
Right, so the difference between this though and the temporary trailer situation is that these would be connected somehow to either a septic
Yes.
or water and.
That's why I wanted to address, because the individual that I know, which is actually a family member, has one of these, a niece, that she believes that, it's kind of like the free spirit type thing. She believes that the waste product can be composted and just dumped on the ground. Well, we in the health department, I kind of don't agree with that, So that's the issue why I think we should address these and say, yes, we will recognize your tiny home as a home, but you still have to meet our regulations. It doesn't have to specify, we don't have to have anything specific for them. We're just acknowledging it, so people don't come in and just put a tiny home here and say, I have the right to do this and I'm gonna, dump my crap on the ground. That's really what we're trying to get away from. It's all comes down to health.
And I can also picture, that tiny home being the second home on a lot.
Right. And that's, to be perfectly honest, that's what was happening this summer, is if we don't identify it, people are coming in and it's a relative and it gets thrown on a, big piece of property. Now we have two primary residents on a house, on one lot. So that's why I think we should put something in here. And it doesn't have to be a lot, it just says, we recognize tiny homes, you have to meet the same ordinances as every other home. However you want to, we can look at the legal side of it, but that'd be the gist of it.
Yeah, so I'd almost consider it almost two things. One would be if it's permanently there and it's just a small house, versus if it's sitting still on a trailer, still on wheels. Even like mobile homes, for example, when they're brought in, they're usually put up on piers and then tied down, so they're not.
Yep.
They're no longer just movable. They're no longer, you have to go bring a truck in there and tow it out. So I'd almost treat it the same way we
These are,
the travel trailers.
and that's where the gray area gets
The
in, why I
camping
want to
car.
identify it, because the tires, it's not a mobile home. The wheels aren't coming off. These people are gonna
Right.
come here and they're gonna go, they're gonna go skiing in Aspen for 6 months, and then they're gonna go to wherever and they're gonna move along, and this is their home. And it does meet life safety standards, but this is their home and it is gonna move. And there have been on the, national level, that these people have won the right to do this, because housing is, affordable housing is a big issue. But we're looking at it from the health side. You wanna have the tiny home? Great, we support it, save some money. But you're not gonna damage your neighbor, you're not gonna jeopardize your neighbor's health. And that would be my thought process behind that.
Probably, I recommend we do more research. There's other states that have found ways to make it work. So Maine, I think, has moved that way recently.
See, I do insurance, I'm wondering how they insure them, because I've found it that.
Special
There's a
products
company
now.
out in Washington, yeah,
Yeah.
that's their niche is surplus markets, but that was the biggest thing with driving a lot of stuff is, insurability. Same thing with off the grid, it's great, good luck insuring it.
All right, let's move on, just if we can.
Just in terms of, you mentioned the thing about school and everything, and school size has been a hot button issue for us, so if it is something that we see a trend or demand for it, that probably pushes us that we need to get it figured out. Because if we do have loopholes and people find ways to take advantage of it without us having the right language out there, although it's probably not possible today.
I'm not saying you deny this one, because they do have a right, people have a right to have this.
Okay. So we do have a whole,
The tiny homes people can do. The way you regulate it is say that you have to have a 2-acre lot. Or, a lot and then get a variance and all of that stuff, type thing. You have to go through the system is all I'm saying.
Same thing we do with manufactured housing now,
Exactly.
we allow it as long as it has, it's on a
Yeah,
lot that's
exactly.
conforming.
And we wouldn't treat it any different. You just have to go through the system, and if you can go through the system, then great, we welcome you.
gotcha.
Well, and I don't see how tiny homes are any different than manufactured housing. They look and resemble very much a manufactured home. They should be treated the same, in my
Right.
opinion.
The only, and I agree with that, they should be treated the same. The only difference I see is these truly are mobile.
Well, so is a mobile home.
People aren't, usually a mobile home, somebody will come in, nobody's like hooking up their mobile home every 4 or 5 months and going to a different location.
True.
So you have these coming in, and I'm not against these tiny houses at all, please don't think I'm not, I am. What I'm trying to avoid is people come in, and it almost goes back to the camping type thing. Even though these are not campers, these are people's home, we're just trying to say, there's some health and safety regulations, and other things. We just want you to play by the same rules as everybody else. That it's not because it's a tiny home, it's not a free pass to do what you want. That's all
Right.
we're saying.
Well, it's,
Um,
that goes back to the campers and stuff. I mean, they kind of all fit together in that you can't just come in and do your own thing is the bottom line. If you're
Except-
going to be living in something temporary for 3 or 4 months and popping in your tiny home and going somewhere else, or permanently and living here, you still have to.
Here's the difference. Is tiny homes have been recognized as real homes. They have insulation in them. They have life safety
Right.
issues in them. They have certain things that campers don't have to have. Campers aren't intended where, in the wintertime, there is no insulation. And so a camper truly is not. These tiny homes are. They are being designed, and they're being built very well, actually. They have insulation. They are designed to live in year round. So that's a positive thing, where a camper really isn't designed for that.
So
Not all of them, but some of them.
So I'd say almost you have to treat it 2 ways though. The ones that are permanently installed are basically a house. The ones that are not are a temporary
Correct.
trailer, and they would have to have a camping permit. 'Cause
Correct.
how do you assess that? You're assessing that the house is there, but it's not even there 6 months a year, or maybe 8
I
months
think
a
if
year.
you would go down that road, we would probably want to talk to legal, because to tell somebody they have to take the wheels off it, I don't think that's a good road to go down. No pun intended.
Primary residency on a lot.
Yeah.
If you decide to go somewhere for 6 months, you're still being taxed for having a home on a lot in town.
Yep.
Well, a lot of work to do.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's probably a lot more, for sure, a lot more to do. Appreciate you
well-
coming in.
We'll take a look at it as next year goes along, where we come and stuff. Those are just the ones that I kind of thought were the priority. And if you want me to do any research on any of these, I will look up those 2 items for you. But if you want me to do any other research, let me know through Joanna, and I'll get information and try to make it easier for you guys.
Great.
Thank you.
And I don't think I'm out of line. You're welcome to any of our meetings. Input is always appreciated.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was nice meeting all of you.
Thank you, Dale.
Next on the agenda is discuss zoning update RFP. And I think there's a separate copy.
Yes.
Yes. So Ed had put together kind of this proposal. Well, since you put it together, why don't you describe it?
Yeah. So this was based on, there was a meeting that I wasn't at, but then I was chair at the next meeting, so I agreed to write this up. Basically, taking some of the feedback we've had from the prior building inspector and the other boards to try to, and then Chris Sterndale, town administrator, as to how do we approach our various documents here, site plan regs, zoning ordinance, and subdivision regs, and to try to make them all kind of conform with one another, provide an ease of use for us and for applicants, and everything. It was suggested that we maybe do a request for a proposal, where we send it out and have it kind of be a couple step part. One would be, how do we do this? And, two, help us do this. To provide us the scope of work and everything else, especially as we look to amending certain sections, how best to do that going forward, with things that are on the plate now and in the future. So this was the draft of it. On language, kind of used some of the information from that Chris had sent, some information from what other towns have used for various requests for proposals. Biggest thing is, that they provide deliverables and a timetable of that. And we would have to determine a budget for it, which, we may want to break this up into two parts or send this out to like SRPC or someone first and say, we're looking at doing this, in your experience, what's the scope of something like this cost? And so we have a ballpark. Is it 10,000? Is it 50,000 or less? And that may govern what we do.
So I know most people are just looking at this for the first time, so I think if we can just read through this and maybe we can have better discussion next meeting, and then we'll move it from there. Okay?
Tear it apart, you're not gonna hurt my feelings.
Question about this, whereas we are not obviously going to be addressing it until October at this point, and then getting this sent out, we are not likely to get much of anything done for the ballot at all for next year, correct?
For the kind of rewriting pieces?
Correct.
Yeah, I would say, yes, I would say it's not gonna probably happen before then.
Okay, so for items that we feel either from what we received this evening from Dale and other things that we, like we'd spoken about earlier with the private road issues and stuff, those are things we really should be moving forward on anyway
Yeah, those things I think we're gonna need to address for this next.
for this next ballot.
Yes.
Okay.
There might be some overall organizational, some help with rewriting some stuff for the following year or something, but, help organize and clear up and whatever. But I think we should address some of the,
Okay, I just
specific
wanted to make
things.
sure we weren't gonna be putting everything on hold because of this, because to me, we've got too many things that really do need to be addressed,
yeah.
No, I agree.
regardless of how we may mess
So
up
let's-
here and there with it.
Let's just step back then. I mean, I don't mind stepping back. Why don't we have the list of things that are a priority? I know we just got, these bullets from Dale, but we also have some other things. I just wanna, let's get that down so we know what we wanna talk about, and then over the next 2 meetings, maybe we just break those up, maybe 2, 3 meetings. We can discuss one of those things in depth and get consensus or vote on what we want to do. That sound like a plan?
Absolutely. When do we have to have this, everything submitted?
The deliverables, Joanna, for the ballot, need to go in when? I've got that right here, I don't have it. Wait. So first day of full public hearing is January 11th. The notice must be
posted by January 10th for that.
So by the end of the year, we need to have all of these, our ducks in a row with these.
Okay. Do we need, do we have enough time with just our board meetings to get through that, or do we need a subcommittee, at least a couple meetings to try to hash out stuff?
Why don't we decide that after we get our list?
Fair enough.
So let's just list them and then we can prioritize them.
I was trying to find the last time we
Route
did
4
that.
commercial zoning?
Yeah.
Okay, so Route 4 commercial zone.
Do we want that to go up on that board there so we can all see it easier, or just write them down?
Sure. Are you gonna write them up? All right, that's a good idea. Thank you.
Since nobody could see that on the camera, we're actually playing Pictionary.
For me?
If you turn it, the camera can't see it, so then I said people think we're playing Hangman.
All right, so Route 4 commercial zone.
I had this list somewhere.
I don't know, driveway setbacks. That's one. Steep slopes was another.
Steep slopes. ADUs.
I had private roads.
Private roads.
What were we talking about on those? I know we have something for the packet about from the Board of Selectmen tonight. I can't remember what we were.
That was for the temporary trailer housing thing was going to the select board.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, there's another thing in here too from, it's like the selectmen are gonna have a policy for their part of private roads.
Yes, it's already on there.
Yeah, but I couldn't remember what our part was.
What our part on this is removing it from the ZBA's jurisdiction.
So that actually leads to definition of frontage. Which is why you know from going to the ZBA.
So we clear that up, everything goes to Board of Selectmen?
Define the frontage differently and they don't have to go to ZBA. Yeah, right now we have it as it must be on a class 5 or better road, correct? Correct. And if frontage is just frontage of the road that accesses your property, or something along those lines, and not the class 5 or better. I have the RSA books definition of frontage right here, if you want to hear it.
I think
We're just gonna list them out right
Yeah,
now.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Multifamily dwelling conversions.
We talked at one point about, multifamily in general.
Maybe.
We talked about multifamily in general at one point, about making it less restrictive, because the way it is right now, to do new multifamily is very difficult, but to convert it is very easy. So, we talked about looking at that, but I don't know, I don't know, we actually made it as one of the priorities for this year.
So you went just multifamily by itself?
Sure.
Yeah, then we can just leave that as one. Joe, remind me from Transportation Subcommittee, are we,
Private roads was the one we talked about the most. We got that covered.
in scenic roads? That doesn't
It's not
seem
as-
to have a zoning
No.
or change.
And the other part of that was the road safety, but we kind of reached a
Yeah, and it's not really any change we'd have done to the, that's kind of a master planning.
I think there might have been an email, Ed, didn't you write an email once, I think, that had, it was prior to our first review of zoning updates? There was some, maybe after this meeting, I'll go and see if I can find it.
Yeah, we had a list before.
There was, this was a lot of it,
Yeah.
but maybe we can just go back and double check and see if we missed anything.
Yeah, and that's fine. I think if we just, get them on a list and kind of prioritize them. Is there anyone else, Buzz, you remember any, Joanna?
Setback chart.
Right, chart, yeah. Making the setbacks a little bit clearer within the regulation.
That's just the way it's formatted, correct? Yeah. That won't work if there's a formula.
You're right.
I don't even know, would that actually even need to go to voters? Because that's not, if we're not really making a change, it's just adding a chart in for clarity.
I don't know, when I asked at a NHMA session about changing anything in the zoning ordinance, they said anything aside from clerical has to go before
Yeah, okay.
the voters. That's changing it pretty dramatically.
Okay.
You're taking out all kinds of language and putting it all into the chart.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, if you take out the language, but if you leave the language in, then
Make
not
it a
the chart.
figure that supports the language.
Yeah.
How about grandfather to non-conforming?
Well, we haven't seen him for a little while. Anything relative to open space developments? We're pretty solid on that, right? Okay.
It's interesting we haven't seen.
No.
Well, we haven't had really any big developments in
Yeah.
a while. So do you want open space on there?
No.
We're
I
not,
don't- no,
we're
I
not,
don't
we're
think
not
so.
gonna get to everything anyway.
No, you're right, we're not.
I don't have anything specific on it right now anyway.
That's nine items right there. Yeah.
Okay, so let's prioritize these 9.
Importance and ease.
Route 4.
Important and ease? I think Route 4 is important.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is important.
To you, but,
No, but it is in general to the community,
okay.
based on the number of people we have going to the ZBA. It's not just me. It's to a lot of people within our community.
I was kind of joking about it, so. Since you just jumped in and you didn't include us in the importance part of it.
I would,
Sorry.
I second that. How's that sound?
Thank you.
All right, so.
I would say steep slopes as we're running out of good flat land to build on in town. Now we're moving into the hilly terrain, as we saw on Route 4.
Yeah.
So we probably need to tighten up our expectations in that area.
I think an easy one to discuss and then to potentially put in place would be the driveways,
Driving setback?
/roads.
That's four out of the 9 already.
In terms of new development, I'd say the driveways and the steep slopes kind of go together. As well as a definition of frontage. Yeah, well, yeah, in a sense, they sort of complement each other in the scenarios that we're going to be facing with future.
These 3 with that.
Yes, yeah.
Actually.
So, yeah, maybe we can just lump them into the discussion.
Sort of like, I don't want to say a package deal, but
Yeah.
Right.
they are very closely related to each other.
On ADUs, do we want to include small homes on that as well?
yeah, I was gonna say, what do we,
Or tiny homes?
Would that
where do
be-
we have to go on that? How's,
And
That might be,
temporary-
that might be an easy one, just because we're gonna get through the, we're gonna try and do some state compliant, being consistent with it. So that's kind of an easier one.
Good to have a couple.
Route 4
easy
should be
ones.
easy,
Route 4 should be easy.
because
Yeah.
isn't it commercial residential, and we were thinking about dropping residential off of that?
Yeah, if we're ever gonna have a Nottingham business district, that's pretty much it.
This start as well?
We haven't got there yet, so I think it's why don't we number them? How's that sound?
Well, I
Instead of a star, why don't we put a number? So we've.
So we think all of these are
all-
important to address this year, or address.
Well, let's start with, Route 4 is number 1.
Number one, yeah, definitely.
So if you want to, do we feel like the driveway, the steep slope, and the frontage would be 2? Or is there something more important? ADUs, private roads, setbacks, clarity?
I think whatever number they get, those 3 have equal weight. Just thinking about what we saw with the recent Route 4 application and, you know, that's the kind of terrain that remains in town is hilly, rocky, irregular, uneven.
Not,
So the 3 of those,
yeah.
And the grandfather to non-conforming, that's something we probably just pass by legal and say,
Yeah.
we're looking at changing this, are we gonna, by doing so, are we gonna either take away a bunch of stuff that we didn't mean to? Or, you know, are we better off doing it? And then we'd have to add non-conforming.
You know, the last time we
Definition.
dealt with steep slopes, we spent a year on it. And it still didn't pass.
Yeah.
Didn't pass this board. So, just be careful how much we're biting off here. We got 90 days.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think, not to overcomplicate the prioritization, but there's impact and complexity. And the ones that are easy, if we knock those off and we run out of time, we know we can at least get those out there.
Yeah, and we may not, for that direct purpose, we may not want to bundle steep slopes with those other 2. Yeah, let's keep them separate for now.
But do we want to bundle that, and this? Setback chart, definition of frontage, and driveway setback?
Do we want to fool around with a setback chart
Well-
if we're going to change setbacks?
If we're gonna, yeah, that's a bigger discussion, is if we change the setbacks, that's a longer discussion than just putting what we have into a chart.
But we're looking at, what do we want to tackle as far as discussions for how, so if he comes back to us with the formula and we either like it or don't like it, don't we still want to be just discussing the rest of this to bring before the voters, or do we not? I mean, this is what we're looking at, is what do we want to tackle,
Yeah.
not what we're going to do with it, we don't know yet. So what's important?
So let's then just do the driveway setbacks and the frontage.
And this.
Yeah,
And
that's
this
fine.
one. So meanwhile,
That's fine.
what, number 2?
Number 2.
3?
And the last one's a real easy one that we can probably eat up in one meeting without.
So that's
problem.
administrative and, yeah, I think
So you want that off?
No, I think
Up
that
one?
be number 3, right?
number 3,
Because
Wait, this is number 3?
Sure.
yeah, because I think.
hopefully that should be one of the easiest
Yeah.
things that's least controversial.
Do we want to look at a number 4 or no?
I think we rank them all, and then we just
Started
see
hitting
what
them.
we can
Yeah.
get done.
Should we look at ADUs next?
Yep.
Yep. So now are we, have steep slopes gone down below number 4 now?
Yep.
Okay, so. Can we put the non-conforming and maybe the private road? Because what are we doing with private roads? We're just taking it out of ZBAs and making it the policy that's in our packet now?
If we redefine frontage to not include a class 5 road better, if you take that part of frontage out, then anybody that lives on a private road won't need to go before the ZBA as a matter of course in order to get there for a variance.
Because
Right now, that is what they're coming for us for as a variance. We've been advised that you can't consider the private road your hardship. So it makes it very difficult for them to meet hardship when
Yeah.
it's because of the road.
It puts more control in the select board than allowing for
Correct.
review by the ZBA.
Right, so there's the policy that the select board has put together,
Correct.
and, I mean, that's in our packet as well, so
But
this,
that doesn't exclude it from coming to us at this point.
okay,
It's actually a two-track process.
Correct.
yeah.
They still have to go before the ZBA for that road frontage issue.
Okay, maybe it's not as simple as I was thinking.
Better than what I'm
So if we
doing.
change the way we have it in our language, they would not have to go for the variance at that point, they would just go to the
It's-
ZBA? I mean, go to the Board of Selectmen for,
The state says that's where they're supposed to go.
Right. So
So we're
that's
actually
the only-
providing an avenue where the board of selectmen could say, we don't want to have to keep dealing with development there because at some point we'll have to take on the road or do, like, that gives them the control to say, no, you can't build there. Theoretically. If it's really going to cause problems for the town. Where we can contradict each other if the ZBA says, yeah, you can.
well, you have two scenarios again. One is subdivision
Yeah.
versus existing lot where someone's trying to add or expand. So,
Right.
so I want to make sure we don't mess up anything with new development versus,
Well, everything would be going before them anyway.
Yeah,
But what I'm saying is, for anybody that already has a home and wants to do something to it on a private road, right now they have to come before the ZBA because it's on a private road, because of our frontage statement.
well, anything they want to do that's expanding the non-conforming use, because they're pretty much non-conforming lots, so they're expanding upon their non-conformity, right? Is that what's being acted on? Like they're either expanding their footprint of the house or adding a structure or something,
Well,
right?
yeah, or even like a carport, because they're adding something on there, they've got to come before the ZBA.
All right, so let's just make it this, do we want to do private roads fifth or steep slopes fifth?
I vote private roads before steep slopes.
Same here. I think private roads need to be.
Anybody else want to weigh in whether they want steep slopes before private roads or private roads before steep slopes?
I think private roads are definitely a more pressing problem right now than, I mean, steep slopes is gonna become a bigger problem as all the good flat land goes away, but right now, private roads are definitely,
So, yeah, and what we're trying to address with the private roads is to make the process more seamless. Because right now it goes to ZBA, us for recommendations if it's an existing lot and not new subdivision. And
Buzz,
then
are you okay?
ultimately to
I'm
the
sorry.
BOS.
Buzz, are you okay with
I think steep
private roads
slopes.
before steep slopes?
I think steep slopes is gonna be way too big of a project for the 90 days we got left.
All right, so let's put it last.
That seems like something that we'd want input through the RFP, like get experts on that so that it
We're gonna
helps us.
we're gonna need some consulting
Yeah,
help with
yeah,
that.
yeah.
We've already got an outline done that was done by a consultant with our help. So, I mean, we have a base to work with, but it's gonna take time. It's gonna
Yeah.
take,
And that didn't pass, so we want
it
to,
didn't pass in here. It didn't go before the people.
Yeah, it was a split vote.
So,
That's, yeah, that's-
yeah, report number 1. And for number 2, it's driveway setbacks. Definition of frontage. And setback chart. We do that.
Slash formula.
And number 3 was grandfathered and non-conforming. Four is ADU tiny home, et cetera. address was multifamily, that's why I wanted to write this up here, multifamily dwelling conversions.
Seven it is.
Okay.
Yep.
We may not get to it, but just so it's on the list, do we want to throw dark skies up there?
I know Dark Skies went to the conservation folks, and you ended up not
Oh,
having, not following the plan. Somebody was supposed to come and give a presentation, and then all of it, sudden Dark Skies just fizzled out, right? I know it's still a concern, but it's not anything that's been moving forward.
I know we're missing stuff. I just
Yeah.
remembered something about, Sue had something about the reclassification or stream order, which the Concom is working.
Fourth order
I think
streams.
the Concom was working on, like a takeaway from the planning board.
Right.
And it was gonna bring it back to us. I think that was one, and maybe there might be one other thing.
let's call it agile planning. We know we can at least get started.
Yes.
And then if we find stuff, we can reprioritize.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what's our time frame? Obviously, before the end of the year, now looking at how many meetings we have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we've got to tackle, like,
And like,
yeah, 4, I guess we could.
Thanksgiving comes out, people are gonna-
Right. So that's two a session, 2 a meeting. Or do we want to have one meeting that's just,
Just have one meeting that we just try to knock it.
all right, so what do we have on our caseload right now?
Just getting ready to bring that up. So, provided he gets it into me in time, we have, the
Okay.
multifamily on the 10th of
Yep.
October. I have a conceptual for you for Moore's Road as well.
On the 10th?
On the 10th. Yeah. Nothing on the 24th currently. I anticipate the Whites Grove subdivision sometime in November to be presented to you.
We only have one meeting in November, though, right?
2.
2. We have the 28th, but we don't use,
Likely, we probably.
Oh, yeah, likely we don't, yeah,
yeah.
right. We're only having one meeting in November.
Typically, yes.
So then the question is, do we want to put one of these on the agenda for the 10th? While we have a couple cases? Or should we just try and get a bunch done on the 24th where we have no cases?
Oh, no, I think we should try and do one, just in case, you never know.
Wasn't the Route 4 zoning just a matter of
Right.
changing the language?
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's get that
Okay.
done.
So let's put that on the agenda for the 10th, the Route 4.
Would you be able to get?
Should I write
do you
that
think
on
we
there?
need a- Just legal response on if there's any kind of, are we shooting ourselves in the foot if we change grandfather to non-conforming? Or are we,
So get both of them in motion.
yeah, are we taking away anything from people accidentally by doing that? Or if it's just, is it actually recommended by them too?
Ed, I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm talking this way. I was asking if, I don't know, if Dirk or you, if we can just get a legal, if we think we need a legal opinion on if changing grandfather to non-conforming is as simple as that, or is there a legal thing that we'd be missing by doing it? Would we be creating some kind of loophole or problem for current residents that are currently falling under a grandfather to change it to non-conforming?
If you guys want, I can ask Chris if it's something that's necessary in terms of legal. The reason why I say that is him being on the chairman of the zoning board in
All right.
Durham has already seen a lot.
I'm
So
fine with
maybe-
that too.
Maybe that's a good start, and then if
Yep.
he says, yeah, let's get legal, then he can do that.
Sounds good.
But we already know that the RSA, the term grandfathered is not in
It's not in the
the
definition.
RSA.
Yeah, it's not in the definition. It might be in the text somewhere, or maybe we just do a quick search or something, but.
From NHMA, things we went to, I remember them saying, get it out, get it out.
Change it, yeah.
Oh, so that was a recommendation from the conference?
Yes, it was.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it was.
And I actually have that book in my office.
Okay. Good, that's good to know. Then, yeah, just check with Chris, and then maybe that's just a simple one.
And I can pop through the book, maybe it has suggestions of language changes, if not just non-conforming, maybe there's a few other words that are appropriate. We can look at that.
Okay, and then, I mean, we can have them depending on how why don't we just try and get through as many as we can in the time that we have, instead of setting, we're gonna do this one on this date and this one on this date.
Yeah,
We'll
because
just-
what's gonna happen is, we're gonna get halfway through something, gonna have to push it into the next meeting anyway, and that's gonna change our schedule.
All right, so we'll just keep with the prioritized list and keep going from the next meeting.
So October 10th is going to be tackle what we can during the meeting?
Yeah, and you don't need, you don't list these as on the agenda, we'll just list zoning changes or amendments or whatever whatever we call these. But if you could put that list together and send it around, and then if there are other items, we can just add it. All right, let's go to the next agenda item. Discuss and change, review new policy for building permits on private roads. So I think we just talked about that a bit, but there is a new policy. It's in here. I don't know if we need to do anything. We don't have to act on it. We just have to review it.
Yeah, I mean, it's, a few meetings back, I got feedback from the board to bring to the select board, and we kind of worked that into this. So that, one of the things that Chris did, he actually, on the back page of it, he kind of graphed out a workflow just to give an idea of how it looks in operation. And you see, when you get down to step 3, it becomes a parallel track process for the applicant. They have to,
So that's going to be concurrent?
concurrent, yep. And, if you're denied on one side versus the other, that's it, shows over, or you can obviously, appeal, or, but I think it's a fairly good layout of how it will look for the applicants following this process.
Yep.
So in other words, the applicant's not gonna have to file a planning board and a ZBA? They're gonna be done at the same time?
No, they have to follow both processes at the same time.
So they have to pay for both of them?
No, for the planning board, because this is if it's just a building permit, or, so it's already an existing lot, so it's not a subdivision. So there's no fee, because it's our part of that, when there's no subdivision, no new development, we're.
So there's no
we're
fees,
advisory.
that's what I'm asking.
We're
There's no-
advisory only.
There's no fees involved?
Not for our part.
For the
There is for
planning board.
ZBA, because you have to notify the abutters and you have to post the notices and stuff, so there is a fee for ZBA. That's why I'm saying that it doesn't make sense to have people just go to the ZBA. It's like, that's an added fee for people. It's not they just appear at us.
But I think it's still gonna go
Well,
ZBA. 'cause-
But the planning board, if we're gonna have a public hearing, doesn't that have to be noticed too?
No, because it's advisory only. So it has to be noticed, but it doesn't have to be noticed. It just has to,
Well, maybe that is one of the, maybe it shouldn't, maybe this chart shouldn't state conduct public hearing.
Well, that's what you do, though. You open up a public hearing to hear both sides of the case, right?
Not in this, because there wouldn't be, we're not voting on anything. There's no vote of approval.
Okay. But for regular,
It's more of a weigh-in situation.
How about, seeing as this is the first time I've seen this, how about we take this home and talk about it next time?
Yeah.
and this isn't us, this is the select board.
I know, but if there's language in here that we want to talk about, we should have a chance to review it.
Right. I think all Chris did was he incorporated existing processes, and he put, he added we added the steps, the legally required steps that the select board is supposed to take under the RSA. So this is just Chris's interpretation of the existing processes charted out. There's nothing new here.
Yeah, at some point, the town, the Board of Selectmen handed off, delegated that responsibility to the ZBA, but when the RSA kind of makes it clear that the select board
Yeah, you're not
can't
supposed to
really
do
do
that.
that. So this is the ZBA, the BOS kind of going back,
Trying to make it right.
using the way the current process is or is supposed to work.
Yeah, I mean, but if somebody sees something in here that's not part of it, then we should say something.
Like,
Like, if we don't have to have a public hearing, then that's just one less process that would have to be included.
I can see why right now, I don't know if it's the way we just have our current process, but it can create confusion. So they go to the ZBA, they get a variance, they go to the select board, say they get denied, then it goes back to the ZBA. Because, if they appeal it, they appeal back to the ZBA, so you're appealing back to a board that's already approved it. It's kind of a strange thing. I don't know if we can eliminate that or not.
That's why I'd like to think about it for a while.
Think about it.
Yep.
Okay, let's go to the next item on the agenda. This would be, so, the applicant for this case, for Kane, the multi-use, multifamily conversion, has requested a second continuation, and that would be to October 10th. And we're getting pressed up against our 65-day required action timeline. In fact, it would be October 12th, would be when that time would be up. So we would have to act on the 10th, and he would not be allowed any other continuances after that date. Right now, he indicated that he would have his application materials in by the 3rd, and I would say that if he doesn't have those in by the 3rd, then on the 10th, we would have to either vote to deny it, or we could stop the time. We could take a vote to stop the time until he gets all the materials in. But that only gives us 2 days once he feels all the materials are in. So we're basically gonna be out of time.
Our regulation's 1 week prior though, correct?
Yeah, so we say 1 week prior, so it would have to be there on the 3rd.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't make that 3rd, then it would probably be a recommendation that we would have to deny that
Yeah.
application.
I don't think we want to set that precedent.
Right. But what we would need to do tonight is, because previous continuations were to the next meeting, which was a date specific, that meeting was canceled, so there was no application or anything that was heard that evening. This is the next actual meeting, right? So we should vote today to make it official that we are continuing this to the date, which is the October 10th.
Okay.
So I would have a vote that,
All right. Mr. Chairman, I move that we continue case 18-003-SIT from Paul Kane to October 10th, 2018, our next scheduled meeting at 7 PM.
Seconded.
there's a motion and a second. All those in favor indicate aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that's unanimous.
With that, the OSI, or whatever it is now, OEP, now is OSI, I think, they definitely recommend and very strongly recommend that we take votes like that on these to maintain the chain of, chain of time. To show that.
What we also can do is that we can continue the case to the next meeting. We don't have to have the specific date. So we can continue it to the next meeting, which then perpetually,
I think
that's what I read in there.
I'd worry that if we eat into the time frame,
Yeah. I don't say that we're doing it, but that is what they had in there.
I'd be leery of doing that, 'cause the abutters, they only get noticed once, and then they have to follow it, but if we don't go to a time and date specific on the continuation, then it could potentially get lost.
Right.
I don't know.
And that is why it's important when we do accept an application, we're now bound into that 65-day window. And the applicant, you know, if they want their application accepted, you know, they have to present us with the material for that application within the time frame and enough time for us to review it. I mean, in this case, if there's significant differences in what he's submitting on the 3rd, you know, we may not be able to review all of it in 1 week. And we're gonna do it, try it, but in some cases, if there's a big difference, and it's a lot different than what was continued, then we may just deny it because it's a totally different project. We'll see. All right, the next thing is public comment. I see that there's a member of the public out there. If you would like to make comment, please come forward, state your name, and whatever your comment is.
Sam Demerit, I chair the Conservation Commission, and I'm a resident of town, of course. A week or so ago, I attended a floodplain management course over at the Seacoast Science Center about improving flood resiliency in community. And I brought some materials with me that I can leave with you.
Great.
Review them. They did send me an email with this slide program on it that I can forward.
Yeah, that would be great. If you can forward it to Joanna, she can forward it around to the rest of the board.
Okay,
Yeah, that would be great.
that's really all I got.
What was the most important takeaway from this meeting?
There's a number of things that you can do. I mean, well, of course, and the feds are redoing their floodplain, 100-year floodplain again. So, I mean, there's gonna be some changes, I guess, either pro and con, or, you know, just out here.
Yeah.
But they talked about some of the stuff, not so much for us, but the seacoast, you know, putting some of these homes that are on the seacoast that are subject to flooding and the tides up on stilts, so the tide can go underneath without, you know, knocking the whole house over.
Right.
And it may be something like that if somebody has built something here in a floodplain here, that when we've got a big rush of water, you know, maybe that thing should be up on a, you know, up 2, 3, 4, 5 feet or whatever.
Yeah.
It's funny, actually seeing, again, insurance driving a lot of that too, because people can't afford flood insurance because it becomes $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a year.
And the thing is, if you
But it would still
do
get
some of
involved.
these things, you can reduce the flood insurance.
Right, you get the free board, yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
I'll
Thank
leave
you.
this with you. and-
Yeah, great. No, that's perfect. Thanks, Sam.
Okay.
Oh, we'll pass it around. I'd like to take a quick look. Here. Let's go this way first. Any other, I'll just go around for updates.
All
Buzz?
set?
Nothing?
Tony?
Since we last met, well, we got that Class 6 policy put in place. Beyond that, really not much going on in our shop, other than tax deeding, which comes up this time of year. We're gearing up for budget season. And then, and that recent incident out on Mendel Road getting washed out has got us studying the whole emergency lane scenario in road maintenance and so on and so forth, because that's an expensive venture. So we may be taking action on that at some point, but we're still studying it right now.
Didn't you guys also meet about safety out here in the parking lot with the
Yes.
lighting?
Thank you for bringing that up. We did talk about that. We talked about that the other night too. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of safety concerns have been brought up both within the building, you know, with angry residents and whatnot, and you know, situations that have happened out in the parking lot, the poor lighting, even with the addition of security cameras. You know, oftentimes the folks that work late are surprised by residents coming in literally minutes before closing time while somebody's got a deposit bag in hand and whatnot. So we do have some new lighting coming in Actually, Tyler Eaton was able to get some new lighting donated, and I forget by who, but it's coming in very soon. We've got some security upgrades going in the clerk's office, eventually in the select board office. I even suggested adding a couple more cameras, one covering the inside of the lobby as people walk in and in the hallways, so that folks in the select board office and the town clerk's office can see on their monitor, hey, you know, someone's coming down the hall, and then they won't be surprised as much, hopefully. But yes, definitely some movement coming on the security side. So, and we're going to have a keypad. We're getting rid of the metal keys for the building because, you know, it's been the same keys in use since 1970 what. So there's plenty of copies floating around out there, I guarantee it. So we're going to use it is a managed door card system. It will automatically lock and unlock doors at certain times, just, you know, regular business hours, and then for events that are going on the weekends, say the Quilters Guild or whatever, they're gonna have an event from 2 to 3 on a Saturday, they'll have a special access PIN number that will get them in on that day, and so on.
And just to that area, or are they gonna have access to the whole building?
Just, I don't know how many access points there's going to be. I don't know if there's going to be internal locks. I would imagine that the interior will continue to be open as it is now, because like all the town offices are still closed. They're all locked on the weekends independently. So I think it just gets them in the door so they can get to the community center and have their event as needed. We're also going to set up there's panic buttons in the offices now, and folks are a little confused about when and how to use them. So we're going to get some training lined up for them as well, so that that's not an open-ended question.
The offices are situated such that if there is an angry person in there isn't very many ways you can get away from that person. No matter what office it is, your door access is almost always behind you, which means you'd have to turn your back on somebody, which makes it very, very dangerous.
Yeah. So I know like what they're going to do in the town clerk's office, it's going to look more like a bank. There'll still be a counter there. There'll be a glass wall with portals to hand things through, but there'll be a physical barrier there. So, and I imagine that a similar construction will take place in the selectman's office, and if necessary, other places, other rooms too, depending on needs. So, yeah.
Too bad we have to think about that.
Yeah. Well, it's not the same Nottingham that it was 30 years ago, so we have to worry about those things.
Okay, thanks.
That's all I got.
All right. Ed?
How far away are we from budget time? We're a little ways away, right?
Yeah, that was my kind of next bring up. We're not that far away.
Chris reached out to me to ask if I was still on CIP, so at least that type of conversation's already starting. I haven't seen anything about meetings yet.
Did you leave me the schedule? Or did you take it back? I don't remember.
That's the one thing we may need to look at. Again, we talked about it before, but, this year has been pretty decent for applications, and Dirk's been doing a great job at pre-review on them. But if we get back into a cycle of having large, especially apps, complex apps, I think we have. Can't remember if we had a line item in it last year for a planner.
Yeah, we did.
Planner, and if we
Yeah, I haven't looked at what the actual use was, but I don't think it was any.
So the actuals will be sent out on October 4th,
Okay.
and November 5th, submissions and requests are due to the town administrator.
So Joanna has kind of started a list of a couple of things that might be beneficial to the board, so we'll add those into the budgets. And then I'll just ask you guys if there's anything you guys need, physical things here that would help, whether it's table, whether it's a ruler, whether it's, you know, a calculator, or whatever, tools, to let us know, and we can get it on the list and see if we can get those purchased. I know Sue had a request for, I can't remember what it was,
Slope thing.
oh, a level? Oh, yeah, right, so,
She also did ask for something for,
yeah, it was a
Slopes.
inclinometer that she wanted to buy, but an inclinometer, but I have something that's better than that, so I'll do a research and I'll send you what we should get.
I'm writing slopes tool. That way we're
Slope
not
tool.
forgetting it. And you can send me what your
right.
better is.
That's all I had was budget stuff. Gary?
Stratford has their quarterly meeting tomorrow afternoon. I'm not going to be able to attend, but there is a speaker coming that is going to talk about workforce housing. I'm sure I'll get a lowdown on that for the board. I will say though, I found the commissioner meetings are kind of maybe a better place to get info that really impacts us locally. That's what I found, so anyway, those are the ones I'm shooting for, generally.
Just one update. So we had our kickoff for the master plan committee on the 13th. Really just talked about logistics and getting administrative stuff out of the way, rotating chairperson each meeting. Takeaways, just make sure everyone has a good sense of what they feel their priorities are. We did talk about doing prioritized smaller chunks for this update. So next meeting, I want to say October 9th, but I don't remember the exact date. It's the second week of October. We'll come back and talk about which areas to tackle and then how we're going to approach it. So any feedback or hot button topics that you have, feel free to let me know and I'll make sure it's in there. But I know we have stuff from transportation and housing that are priorities that I think we should look at, but that's it.
Great. Then we've got some minutes to approve. Looks like 1, 2, 3, 4 sets. Is that right? So I'd take a motion on those?
3 sets.
One of the things I had on the list of error, and I made sure I noted that so you all knew that that was an error from a previous agenda.
So we just have 3 then, right?
Correct.
The May 23rd, 11th, and 22nd?
Correct.
Right. Mr. Chairman, I move we approve minutes as amended for May 23rd, 2018, July 11th, 2018, and August 22nd, 2018.
Second?
Motion is second. Any discussion? Those in favor, okay, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It's unanimous. Anything else on anybody's mind? There is adjournment.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
Motion is second. Those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
After 9.